Hi, let's catch up on some local news. Now, they say history is just the news, but from a long time ago, so let's start this week by thinking about last week in Faribault history. On January 20th, 1824, a man named Karl Klemmer was born in Germany. In the mid-1840s, finding his way to Watertown, Wisconsin, Karl was a cabinet maker. After getting married and moving west to Minnesota, Karl built himself up until he was able to make a substantial investment as the Civil War drew to a close. In 1865, he created what would become today's Faribault Woolen Mill, an internationally recognized business bringing Faribault's name around the globe. Now, to the news of today. This last week was Martin Luther King Jr. Day breakfast event at South Central College. Misty Schwab at the Faribault Daily News gave a great overview of last Monday's lovely morning. We heard from a number of speakers, like South Central's Dr. Naren Brown. The community came together around the event, bringing students from Faribault Public Schools, members of the Faribault Diversity Coalition like myself, and other prominent community members as well, to enjoy cinnamon rolls, Cambodian porridge, and Somali tea. Before the community wrapped up breakfast, closing prayers of Jewish, Muslim, and Christian origin helped emphasize a sense of unity among those participating in the day's events. That being said, an update from the American Civil Liberties Union rekindled a conflict that began in 2018. A conflict very much rooted in our question of the city's ability to unify. Andrew Diesel of the Faribault Daily News reported that in that year, the ACLU filed a lawsuit against the city of Faribault, alleging that the city council's residential rental licensing ordinance violates housing discrimination law. Essentially, the lawsuit is about crime-free housing program, which was put into practice in 2015 with the support of now Police Chief Andy Boland, and growing perceptions about crime downtown. Responding to the ACLU's lawsuit, the city noted that crime has dropped by about 13% in Faribault since 2015, according to the Faribault Daily News. What's the problem with the ordinance? Well, the main issue is that the ordinance includes mandatory criminal background checks, which the ACLU asserts discriminates against Black, Latino, and Native American residents, who are more likely to receive criminal records than white residents. The ACLU deposition points out that there is no evidence that crime rose in Faribault's downtown in the years leading up to the passage of the program. Rather, they allege that when the housing ordinance was passed, the city recognized that perceptions about crime were driven primarily by growing racial resentment directed towards Somali residents. Nevertheless, the ACLU argues, they attempted to push Somali residents out of the downtown with discriminatory housing ordinances. Pointing to the effects of the ordinance, the ACLU notes that 90% of Black Faribault households live in rental housing, compared to only 28% of white Faribault households. Further, any families pushed out of their rental housing may struggle to find a proper replacement, considering Faribault's staggering affordable housing shortage. More on that later. The city has since updated its housing ordinance, but the ACLU recently announced they would continue with the lawsuit. Though we don't know exactly how the conflict between Faribault and the American Civil Liberties Union will shake out, a recent development in Northfield definitely has the potential to change things in Faribault. Last Tuesday, the Northfield City Council adopted a Tobacco 21 policy, raising the minimum age to purchase tobacco and tobacco products in Northfield to 21. Sam Wilms at the Northfield Daily News reported that starting February 28th, the law takes effect in Northfield. So what does that mean for Faribault? As the push in Northfield to enact Tobacco 21 neared success, the region was thrown into confusion when the Trump administration announced that the federal government, through the FDA, was adopting a Tobacco 21 policy, giving the FDA the ability to fine any retailer selling tobacco to under 21s. However, that apparently federal action doesn't really cover Faribault until either Faribault or the Minnesota government decide to adopt the policy. Now, considering that in the past, Faribault Mayor Kevin Vorodchek's primary concern with Tobacco 21 has been skepticism of whether the measure would be effective unless neighboring cities took it up, Northfield's acceptance of the measure could mean change for Faribault. Now, keep a lookout for developments in the city government that might indicate a growing willingness to go Tobacco 21. Speaking of health concerns, the Minnesota Department of Agriculture has applied new rules designed to reduce the amount of a dangerous chemical in the water supply, Andrew Diesel reported. Yep, turns out that 1 of every 8 Minnesotans could be drinking tap water with a bunch of nitrate in it, according to a new report. In fact, it could be even less than that, because we can only study public wells exhaustively. Well. Luckily, around here, the report suggests there's less of a problem. Only 4 Rice County wells have been identified as historically likely to carry dangerous amounts of nitrate, and those townships are eligible for free nitrate testing. 3 of the 4 are in Northfield. Bridgewater Township, Cannon City, and Northfield proper, and Morristown fills out the places in Rice County at risk. Even given the free nitrate test options, there hasn't really been any significant nitrate problems in Northfield, apparently. Faribault is more or less completely free of dangerous concentrations of nitrate, Travis Block says. Well, that's good. What Faribault does have is contaminated site worthy of being developed, according to the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development, and Andrew Diesel of the Faribault Daily News. Minnesota DEED is financing about half of the cost of the city's plan to build downtown along the Straight River. The city council is planning on zoning for a new apartment complex on the land once owned by Faribault Public Works, and DEED's plugging $800,000 into it to help the project along. Plans are for a 5-story, 96 apartment complex that could help with Faribault's housing crisis. The city is looking beyond housing, though, as part of its comprehensive vision for the downtown. Part of the plan is to utilize the area by the Straight River for bicycle routes, walking paths, and green spaces. City engineer Mark Duchesne envisions 2 small parking lots, a new playground, and a picnic shelter to turn the Riverside area into a community gathering place. Of course, other construction is on the horizon. Emerging from a bitter debate, the city will likely approve a new manufactured home community spot down by the Faribault Foods area, by the intersection of Highway 3 and 30th Street Northwest. It's about 35 acres of land close to a couple businesses. This will be part of the city's goal of stepping up Northside Industry, included as the vision of a potential roundabout at the intersection of 30th Street and Highway 3. The grant from DEED isn't the only investment coming into the community, with a huge bonding bill of $2 billion proposed by Governor Walz for the state. A couple of those bucks will be headed right into town and to Northfield. If the bill passes, the state government will take advantage of the state's low unemployment rate and $1.3 billion surplus to work on rural infrastructure problems and address funding backlogs. Under the governor's plan, Faribault will see $11 million worth of big maintenance improvements for the academies for the blind and deaf, alongside structural updates and expansions to the programming at the Faribault State Prison. On the other hand, several local biking and jogging trail projects are no longer in the running for funds, and the Steele County Fairgrounds request failed to cement backing in Walz's proposal. Notably, $2.5 million of the bill would go to Northfield to fund most of the cost of a transit hub near the refurbished 1888 depot. If approved, the project would be a first step toward a long-sought-after plan to offer transportation between Northfield and the Twin Cities by rail, or more likely in the short term, by bus. In the meantime, advocates see it as a potential spot for community art and music activities. So, is the big bill looking to pass? Well, Republicans have been skeptical about the price tag, and several are asking to cut the $2 billion down to about $600 million. Senator Jasinski of Faribault told Andrew Diesel in the Faribault Daily News that a final compromise is likely to run around $1.3 billion. Now, we'll have to wait and see if the Faribault and Northfield projects get included in the final bill or get lost on the way to a proposal. Unfortunately, there is one segment of both communities that will stay underfunded. It's looking like years of neglecting special education funding is pushing the Faribault and Northfield school districts to slash parts of their special ed budgets, Andrew Diesel of the Faribault Daily News writes. Soon, finance teams in Northfield will work on finding ways to reduce the budget to get it to where it needs to be for the 2021 school year. For the Faribault board, those decisions need to happen this spring. Both school districts put the onus on the state legislature for not keeping up with the growing costs and wonder if that attitude is going to change in the future. One moment of change that'll have to be put off for next year, the Northfield School Board's brief consideration of putting middle school and high school start times back an hour. That idea is being put to sleep, Sam Williams reported. Although the school board is considering moving back start times to 8:30 a.m. at the middle school and 8:45 a.m. at the high school, a number of complications, including transportation costs, pushed the board into skepticism. Ultimately, the board didn't feel strong enough community pressure to justify the complications. Here in Faribault, a $96,000 youth skills training grant is bringing new opportunities for students in the Faribault School District, Misty Schwab reported. The district was one of 17 recipients of the end result of a competitive grant process, bringing interested students into paid apprenticeships at more than half a dozen local industries, including Faribault Transportation, Genio, and Daikin. The funds go into effect next month, and it'll go until June 31st, 2021. Roughly 30 Faribault students will get the opportunity to apply for one of these apprenticeships to begin exploring career opportunities this winter and spring. Finally, in a moment of tentative hope, the Waseca police officer wounded while responding to a January 6th call is taking steps toward recovery, according to online reports from his family. Bridget Kranz reported. The entries by a relative report that the officer, Eric Matson, has been making progress, proving able to sit up, communicate through gestures with his family, and even give a thumbs up. The 32-year-old was shot in the head while responding to a report of a suspicious person earlier this month. As he moves toward recovery, his story has spread across Minnesota and brought the state together. The gift of an official Vikings helmet signed by Adam Thielen, a visit from the Twins, and continued support from other officers have all demonstrated sympathy for Matson and his family. Now, what can we take away from the events of this last week? It's a sentiment that can be shared by all the students exploring opportunities afforded by public education. It's the feeling of recognition that Minnesota State Academy students feel as the governor advocates for them. It's the sense of hope on the horizon as new homes are built and new employees are given work to build them. More people come to call Faribault their home, and though it can be painful, like losing funding to help differently abled students or fight against a rental ordinance, eventually we can get to the point where the city works for us all. Now, progress is a long road, but at the end of it, there is hope. Just ask the family of Officer Matson and the thousands of Minnesotans rallying around him. As Dr. King said, we may find, quote, out of the mountain of despair, a stone of hope. Have a good week, Faribault. See you next time.